Well, welcome everybody to the final week for Division 2 and 3 in the regular season of Reddit League. And we are finally into our championship playoffs in Division 1 and getting ready to crown our champion for season 4. My name is Zotomo and I'm joined as always by Calamity. How are you doing this morning?
Hello, doing okay. I'm semi-conscious.
We're recording at an unusually early hour for you. So great to have you here. And our special guest is my fellow competitor in Division 4B, Pwndnoob. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Still coming down. I just played my last match and we'll talk about it here shortly. So I'm still coming down from the stress of that and the work from that. But I'm doing really well. It's a good time to be talking with you guys. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, glad to have you. Yeah, so let's just get right into it and take a look at the championship playoffs that we have in Division 1. Again, Boxa, Blinky, Raidman, and Orpheus all qualified. Boxa in first and Blinky in fourth. That's the first matchup for you. Raidman in second, Orpheus in third. Will be the other matchup for them. And we'll take a look at their stats in turn here. So yes, Calamity, our first matchup, Boxa versus Blinky, are really kind of a big gap between these two in terms of how their seasons kind of shaped up.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be an interesting matchup. I think you'd have to say that they're both fantastic players. If you just look at their results in their regular season, you'd have to say that Boxer had the better season. Obviously, just look at their records. Blinky, a lot of bonus points, 2 perfect games as well, so he just snuck in there in fourth place. Ahead of Verdok, who had a better score difference than him, but no perfect games, so losing out on that tiebreaker. But I think that Blinky generally, maybe he just took a bit of time to get used to Reddit League. I think if he gets a good seed, then I think both of them probably are almost unbeatable on a good seed. It's going to be really fun to see who of them comes out on top. It will depend a bit on the seed we get. I think if we get an easy or relatively easy seed, we should absolutely expect both of them to get 25k. And then it's just about who can be that tiny bit closer. Although personally, I hope that it's not going to be decided on just a couple of meters of difference. I'd rather see it decided on points. I do think on a world map, I might even think Blinky is the slight favorite just because of how many millions of games, at least it feels like, he's played to get that diverse world record. I don't 100% know how well that will translate to the AI generated world, because obviously he won't get any repeats from his diverse world practice, but I still do think though that on a world map he might have the slight edge, but Boxer can also easily 25k almost any world seed, so it might really come down to just pinpointing.
And a reminder to everyone that there are no draws. It will come down to the total points. So even if only 1 point separates them, that 1 point will be enough to declare a winner to advance to the final. Yeah, so Pwndnoob, yeah, Blinky, as Clemmy said, kind of just squeaked into these playoffs. He is almost 10 points down in the season, sitting on 17 to Box's 26. But as Calamity also said, they both have perfect the 2 world maps we've had so far and likely to do it again. So pretty close to call for you as well.
I'd say so. I think the 3 strongest players just in Reddit League are all in Division 1, and it comes to mind as Boxa. We'll talk about Raidman Mucha in a moment, and then Blinky. And I think Blinky's had by far the most disappointing season in a sense. Both they've had a bit of bad luck. That record does not really show how well they've done. But also, I just feel like Blinky has had so many 25,000s in the other seeds when I've been playing through the seeds. I just feel like I've seen Blinky at the top and Boxa at the top very, very consistently. And I feel, especially with Division 1, it may well just come down to that one rural, just garbage location that you get in rural Russia, US, Argentina. A lot of those places, we saw it last season where it was on like an island over near Vancouver, and there just was no pinpointable location, and that was our deciding factor for the whole season. And I feel like it could come down to that. It could also do precisely that 25,000 and just the pure pinpointing. I know Blinky's very good, and Box is very good at going very, very quickly. And I don't think going quickly is going to be helpful because you need to be getting it down to less than 5 meters potentially. You need to be getting it down as close as you can, given that the pinpoints aren't actually always perfect and rarely are, actually, I should say.
Definitely. So it'll be an interesting one. At the other side of things in Division 1 is Raidman Mucha, our returning champion. He made it to the playoffs. So he got a shot to defend his title up against Orpheus and Calamity. At least on paper, this matchup is a lot closer than the other one, with them second and third. Orpheus finishing the season with a perfect record, no losses.
Yeah, definitely. Orpheus has surprised me a bit this season with how well he's done. Not only just by finishing third, that is not too far out of the ordinary, but the fashion he did it in as well. Anytime like I played through a Division 1 seed as well, Orpheus was always up there, always like 24.9 something, but never with a perfect game. And that's the thing that might cost him against Raidman, because Raidman 25k'd almost half of the seats he's played this season. So you definitely expect him to do it here as well. So Orpheus will probably need his first 25k this season if he wants to have a shot at beating Raidman. And the problem he's got even then is, for those of you who might remember last season, the final from Raidman against Boxer, there was a lot of 25k'ing around that as well. And Raidman was always, like, I think if I remember correctly, slightly closer in terms of distance as well. So Raidman's a very strong pinpointer, and Orpheus, while he has the second highest total score, only just behind Raidman, about 180 points, I think. Yeah, he's got no perfect games and 8 aces left. He's the one that stands a bit out in the sort of, in quotation marks, negative way in terms of aces around those 4.
Yeah, Pwndnoob, in terms of how they've done in the world maps so far, Orpheus did lose on Lakes of the World to Raidman's perfect 25k, but on our improved world, Orpheus did take the win, scoring much higher than Raidman on that one. So it could come down to the seed again, as it probably always will with these top level players.
Yeah, I have infinite respect for Raidman. He's just been someone that I've seen have success everywhere I've ever seen them show up in Geoguessr. Orpheus was a bit of a dark horse for me, and I didn't even realize last season he got 5th, which is just outside of the playoffs last season. Now he's in top 4, and he's always been in the top 4, by the way. Orpheus really hasn't had a time where they need to come back to try and make the playoffs. They've just always been near the top the whole season. And I think they're playing better than they're expecting. I've heard from Orpheus that they were very surprised with just the amount of success that they're having in this incredibly loaded division.
Definitely. We'll look forward to that one. All 4 of our finalists have been known to record their videos, so we'll hopefully be able to bring you the entire championship run in the next week or 2. So look for those videos on the channel in the coming days. Just a quick reminder before we move on to Division 2 that Chicago will be taking on Bulgur in the relegation match for Division 1. We went into detail with that last week with Chicago himself. So if you want to know our thoughts on that, definitely check out last week's Reddit League show for our comments. We'll just give that nod, and good luck to both of them and see who can survive in Division 1. Well, then let's move to that Division 2 and their results. And no perfect games is probably the biggest thing that stands out across the board, but a pretty big win, at least, for the Baseman, Pwndnoob.
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about the Baseman and Calamity because they're going to be the top of the leaderboard. Not actually the best score there from the Baseman with only 23,000. There are other players who've done better, but pulls it out. And I think, is that the closest result? No, there's an even closer result with the 2 Frenchmen there. I've really liked the way that the Basemans talked about the game. Just whenever I hear them talk, they're very good at the pinpointing section, and I've just played this seed in quick warm-up. This coastal seed for Division 2 was quite tough. We can hear from Calamity because he played it competitively himself, but I'm not surprised that nobody got the 25k.
Yeah, very nice. Yeah, Calamity, congrats. That win
Thank you.
against Schluty pretty much guarantees. Well, it does guarantee. We'll spoil it a little bit. Guarantee your top spot in the Division 2, not only auto promotion, but winning the division entirely for that one. But yeah, a couple close matches, 2 draws. Pluki, Talampala, and Pashtek and Max at the bottom of your screen there.
Mm-hmm. Basement against Squilla Wizard was actually like the closest game that didn't end up in a draw this week, but with us now being down to 2 divisions, that game doesn't necessarily have to be all that close anymore. Pwndnoob started talking about it a bit at the start. It wasn't the easiest seed, although the first 4 rounds weren't really that much of a problem for people either. The first round was a repeat from Division 3. Although it was, of course, the one time I actually couldn't be bothered to play the Division 3 seed. So I didn't know. I just saw the results afterwards and was like, 40 seconds, 30 seconds, what's going on here? It wasn't that easy of a round. But yeah, it wasn't that hard of a round either. So pretty much almost everyone 5k'd that either. And then we had some rounds in the US along like the West Coast. That was not too bad around. And then 2 rounds that I personally thought were like on the slightly harder side in New Zealand and Ecuador. And a few people actually did drop a few 100 points in New Zealand. But pretty much the seed was decided by round number 5, which was a round in the north of the Philippines. And while you did have, if you knew it, I think Baseman went the other way to me as well, and I talked with him about it later, and he confirmed to me that in both directions, essentially, there were signs that told you the region you're in. But, well, if you don't know that's the region, then you pretty much had nothing to go off of. And there were quite a few people who just hedged in Panay, just to be like somewhat in the center of the Philippines. Baseman was one of them. So were Pastek and Max. And Basement just happened to be like a few kilometers further away than the 2 of them with their hedges, so that's why he ended up a bit further down with his score. And then, yeah, a couple of other people's also just hedged somewhere in the middle of the Philippines, Toll and Pluki, for example. But yeah, some people did find it. Clyde found it, Teskotak found it. I didn't actually find it, I just got really lucky. But yeah, so definitely most of the games were decided by that. Yeah, there wasn't actually that much that happened in the table in the end. There was just potential for it. Yeah, Clyde made sure that he wasn't going to be the one who had any problems with relegation with his impressive score against Patriots. I, of course, I had no pressure to play to play particularly well anymore because my promotion was already sealed. But that also meant I could play without pressure and do well, and worked out nicely. And well, Schluty at least got a good enough score for a bonus point there. Teskotak with another fantastic performance. He's an interesting one. He's always like sometimes great scores, sometimes average scores. He rarely has bad games as well, to be honest. But
yeah.
Yeah, I think he's been in Division 2 for the longest out of anyone here, as alongside Toll. They've both been in Division 2 for all the seasons so far. And yeah, Shumi just missing out there against him. A bit of a shame for him as well after his great like mid-season. And then yeah, Baseman was already kind of like putting a check mark behind it, like, yep, nope, not getting promoted with that score. But it was good enough. Guelo, again, not the best performance. He actually got close in the Philippines one, but I think Guelo missed on New Zealand. Yeah, and that's why he ended up losing that game. Yeah, Pluki and Tor with a draw there. Had some pretty big relevance as well. And yeah, Pastic and Max with the draw. Same thing there. Max just missed out there on getting some more points.
Nice. Well, let's take a look at how the table finished. And despite a few interesting results, nobody really moved except for Pluki with his draw, and Talampala sees him drop just down far enough to give M the Baseman the automatic promotion spot and see him switch up to face off Schluti in the promotion playoff. Teskotak, despite his nice win over Shumi, was a bit too late, sees him still stay in the relegation playoff position for there. So yeah, almost no movement entirely for this week, and that's how the table finishes up, pretty much like it was last week, except for Pluki handing over the nice result there.
It could not be understated how lucky Schluti was.
Yeah.
Max got a tie, Shumi lost, and Tame Impala got a tie. And if any of those results were a win, Schluti is not in the playoffs here.
Yeah, so definitely very close for him.
Yeah.
Anything else that stands out, Pwndnoob, to you besides that luck of Schluti's?
Yeah, I mean, it's not like Schluti had a bad round too. Like that's the thing, is he ended up having to play Calamity, but was, I think, in the top half with the score, and now gets to play Pluki in the promotion here. So with that, it's really interesting just how tight this division's been. It's been really interesting just to watch throughout the whole season, and it's not surprising it ended this way, with it being, again, just coming down to a bunch of ties and a bunch of really close results, and someone had to squeak away with it. And congratulations to Schluti for being that person.
Yeah, Calamity, you are 6 points clear at the top of the table there, but that was probably by far your biggest lead you've had the entire season. Very late runs by Max and Shumi up the table, see them challenge to keep everything close, but in the end, the top four were pretty consistent throughout the entire season in this one.
Yeah, you could have kind of expected, I guess, if you looked at the results of the first few weeks, me and Pluki up there, and Schluti came up there pretty quickly as well, and then Baseman was kind of like going up, going down throughout the whole season, but still mostly in that sort of range around like 3rd to 6th. I don't even know if Baseman was in the top 2 spots at any point this season other than in the last week. But he ended there at the end. It almost felt like in the last week no one really wanted to get promoted, with no one from 3rd to 8th winning their game. Yeah, actually, Baseman, let me just quickly check. No, he was in first place in weeks 3 and 4, but then started a decline all the way down to 6th in week 7 before he slowly made his way back up again. But yeah, I'm very happy about the season, of course. Was, of course, some very difficult competition as well. I just on the last day managed to get the best total score, just about 900 points ahead of Pluki and about 1,400 points ahead of Clyde, who was a bit unlucky with his season down there in 9th. And yeah, definitely, I think anyone almost out of the division would have deserved to, have a shot at promotion here. And it's going to be a very interesting match with Pluki and Schluti. And yeah, as Pwndnoob said, really, like if any one match would have gone a different way, we could have seen someone else in those promotion playoff spots. And yeah, at the end, it's Pluki and Schluti. And yeah, I was the one who had to play Pluki on the first world map this season. So good luck to Schluti for that, because that was one of Pluki's perfect games. And yeah, down there at the bottom, I think for Pastic as well, it was already over anyway, but at least he got another draw, or like his first draw for another point there to end it. And yeah, Patriots also with a very good game to finish it off, even if it didn't really mean anything for him anymore.
Well, yeah, let's take a look at those promotion and relegation fights. As we mentioned, Pluki and Schluti fighting enough for that 3rd promotion spot. Real Clyde and Teskotak in an American Derby will decide who can stay up in Division 2 with that one. So Pwndnoob, your predictions on how these will come out.
I think Pluki and Schluti are just equivalent players to me too. I hate to say it because you need to pick a side if you're in this sort of seat, but I genuinely don't have an idea of who's going to come out of that. I'd say maybe Pluki just because of the success with the world seeds previously, but I think they're both about as active as they are as each other too. Like I really don't know. On the bottom, it's an American Derby. We're already losing Patriots with one American from this division, and we're going to lose another. As Calamity said, Teskotak can be a bit inconsistent. Clyde, I don't really know too much about their skill or their skill set. But it's a world seed. A world seed can go either way, right? Like the better
Mm.
player or the worst player can win just depending on the seed, because it can often come down to one location or it can come down to every location because they're so diverse in their nature.
Yeah, Calamity. Usually we would give the benefit to the player with the more aces, but a world map does kind of negate that advantage because you don't need to be that accurate to get close to 5K in a round. So Real Clyde having 32 aces to Tesco 13, but again, it's a world map, so anything goes.
Yeah, I would say yes and no, because it does come into play in a way, and that heavily depends on the seed. If you get
Mm.
a seed that's consistently easy throughout and has 5 relatively easy rounds, then it definitely comes into play. Because obviously it doesn't matter if the other person only lost like 2 or 3 points, he's still going to lose the game. Whereas if it's a pretty difficult seed and someone's not even finding the right area in one of the rounds, then it doesn't matter that much anymore. And I think that's mostly what the relegation game here could come down to as well. I think if it's an easy seed, personally, I think Clyde is the favorite. If it's a difficult seed, it could be any out of the two. Clyde just had a great performance in the last week in the Coastal World, and Tescotac as well. So it could be a very close matchup for sure. And with the promotion game, I think I agree with Pwndnoob that there's not really a clear favorite here. Pluki has had 2 perfect games so far this season compared to Schludi's 0. So maybe that gives him a slight advantage there. Schludi also didn't have a perfect game last season. And he also didn't have a game in season 2 when he started. So Schludi so far without a perfect game in Reddit League. So maybe that one might be a bit of an adversary for him. If he gets to like the last round and he's on up for a perfect game, he might get a bit of nerves and might struggle with that. But yeah, Pluki not too great this last week with the Philippines. So yeah, you never know. Like just one unlucky round and it could go the other way as well.
Oh, definitely. So as always, it'll come down to the seed to decide who gets to move up to Division 1 and who has to drop down to Division 3. So we wish those players the best of luck. We'll move over to Division 3 now and see how this division shaped up on their last week. And yeah, Calamity, probably a much easier seed. Just looking at those scores, very nice. 5 perfect games, but also a couple not flattering scores by Paulinho and WTF, probably just running out a bit of gas at the end of the season here.
Yeah, I
I can
think
talk about the nature of the seed. So we had a round that was a repeat from the Division 2 in South
Mhm.
Africa, and then we also had a round in Kenya and a round in UAE. And if you know anything about Kenya and UAE, there just isn't that much coast to deal with. And then we also had a round in Japan, which was fairly straightforward. There was a fair amount of signage for Coca. So there was, as far as I was concerned, 4 easy rounds. I wasn't sure necessarily what people saw in this Canada round, but I'm not surprised that there were 25Ks. It was a much easier seed compared to the ones we've talked about so far.
Yeah, Calamity.
yeah, pretty much what Pwndnoob said. The people that did drop a lot of points mainly did so in the round in Canada that had a location on Vancouver Island. And I'm assuming that because it was in sort of a small town, if people managed to find the name of the town and then figured out, okay, probably on the west coast somewhere. And the thing is, Canada doesn't really have that much of a coastline either. And because it wasn't French, you could exclude like most of Quebec. And that narrows it down a whole lot as well. And so you're essentially left with like New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, Newfoundland, and then, well, British Columbia essentially. And just from the way it looks, you can probably also exclude Newfoundland. So you're really not left with all that much in terms of what you have to search for. So if you just use your time, if you find out relatively quickly what the town is called, which I don't know if you can because I didn't play the seed, but if you do
Yeah,
find that out,
it
go
was
on.
a bit suspicious that the water was on the east side. for being on the West Coast. But beyond that, I mean, it's Vancouver Island. There's just a ton of pines. It doesn't truly look like anything that you'd see on the East Coast.
Yeah, exactly.
So most
And-
players just, I assumed that it was on the West Coast and then went from there.
Yeah, and if you've got 4 minutes, I'm guessing like once you found the town name and once you made your deductions about where it could be, probably got like 2 minutes left to search around like Vancouver Island, maybe somewhere along the coast there. And yeah, even then, a lot of the west coast of Canada and British Columbia is just not really covered because there's nothing there. So you just have a couple of like inlets and stuff like that that you have to search through. And I think you should have more than enough time to find it, as you can see by a lot of the scores.
Oh, very nice. Well, let's take a look at the Division 3 table and how it finished up. LCN has been at the top for the last few weeks, and that doesn't change. Barry Fishy Bear and Freckles also keeping their top spots, but below them, quite a bit of shuffle. WTF's low score sees him drop out quite significantly there, giving Ordbucka, who had his bye week, the last promotion playoff spot. The other end of the table, a pretty nice win for Benica, but also a little bit too late for him there. And of course, Radox up against a perfect game, isn't able to get anything out of that, and sees himself also in that bottom spot. But Calamity, probably the big story of this one that we didn't talk about much in the results is Hugo having probably one of the worst seasons in terms of luck ever. Changes it all around, and it pays him back in the last week. A perfect game is enough to see him jump up into 7th and survive for him.
Honestly, his season wasn't that bad in terms of luck. Last season was far unluckier. He's had like the 3rd lowest total score as well, so it really wasn't all that unlucky. Like specific weeks might have not gone his way on occasion, but in terms of total score and pretty much the other things here, he's right around where he should be. Maybe even a bit too high. If you look at, for example, Radox scored about 18,000 points more over the course of the season. But yeah, it was all came down to that last week and the perfect score for him. And almost a bit lucky for Radox as well. If Benica had scored 10 points more on his in the last round, then it would have been Radox to go down directly. Although the same could be said in reverse. If Radox had scored those 26 points more, they were both on the last round in the UAE, I think it was, where they couldn't quite finish off a perfect game. Then either or could have been in that 10th place, and they're now going to play against Seppo for that relegation spot. But yeah, in the top, nothing much changed anymore. It was kind of expected with LCN and Barry and Freckles as well. And then, yeah, it was WTF missing out on his chance for not necessarily a free promotion or anything, but yeah, he kind of didn't do particularly well on that last seed and dropped down past Ordbock and closed. And yeah, as we said it I think I said it in the past 2 weeks, how Ordbock would have his last bye week his bye week in the last week. So he apparently managed to get into good enough of a position beforehand to make it pay off.
Very nice. Yeah. Any comments on how this table finished up, Pwndnoob?
I would like to note that LCN and Barry Fishy Bear both came from my division in Division 4, where I was trying to compete for the third spot because those two were so good and were well outclassing us in Division 4, and now outclassing people in Division 3. I'm happy to see it. At least proves that my complaints previously were warranted. It's sad to see Radox. Me and Calamity are both good friends with Radox, and seeing him in the relegation, but he did avoid just being directly demoted. And this is in the context of Skydiving Ferret being the peer demotion too. So he still has a chance. He still can beat Seppo potentially, but Seppo is not to be trifled with. I mean, every player here had at least 4 wins, and Seppo had 5. So I'm interested in the relegation match here too. Both are going to be interesting, both going promotion and relegation.
Yeah, so definitely let's take a look at them in a little bit more detail here. Yeah, promotion battle between Freckles and Ordbock, relegation Seppo and Radox. Radox started this season pretty well, Calamity, but then fell off after that. And Seppo has kind of always been towards that lower half of the table. but it does make, what is it? Isn't this 4 out of 4 seasons for Radox in a relegation battle? So
Yes, it is. I think Radox is probably the slight favorite here, but as Pwndnoob said, Seppo is definitely not to be underestimated. Um, yeah, Seppo just didn't really. Well, he had the main problem that a couple other people had as well in that last week, where he didn't know it was Vancouver Island, so he lost most of his points in that round and only dropped like I think 8 points in the other 4 rounds. And that's the main reason why he ended up in this relegation matchup in the first place. Yeah, I think it's definitely a game that could come down to just one round, depending on the seed, of course. I think if it's a more difficult seed, you might favor Radox a bit, but they've both had a lot of experience with Reddit League. They've also both been here since season 1. That I definitely remember because it was back then that I was playing against Seppo in Division 3 back then, and we had Estonia, and I got top 3 in every single division seed. Back then when I still wasn't as good of a player, so that was like a far out of the ordinary thing for me to get like top 3 in even Division 1 or Division 2. Then I played against Seppo in my seed. I still got top 3, but he beat me. So yeah, he's definitely a player that can get a fantastic result on the day as well. And yeah, what I was getting at with that was they've both played a lot of world maps in this tournament competitively, so they should have plenty of experience with it. So it will just come down to their raw skill most likely. And with the promotion match, it is a very interesting one as well. I think like on an average day, Freckles is definitely the favorite. But he just has those like odd rounds every now and then where he just drops the ball and loses games because of it. And if he has one of those in a promotion match, it could quickly turn around for him. But if he doesn't, I think he's definitely my favorite for that promotion spot. And he's also the one player actually in Reddit League this season with the most aces out of anyone. He did have more time, of course, than Division 1 players, but still.
And Pwndnoob, any thoughts on these 2 matchups?
Yeah, Calamity just stole my line. That's 39 or 37 aces from Dem Freckles compared to Ordboka's 22. And I think if you don't have a big understanding of who's the better player, aces is actually one of the places that you can definitely look. For example, we just saw Seppo completely bomb around because it was Canada, right? And that's like, congratulations, you lost 3,000, 4,000 points because you're on the wrong side of a huge country. Compared to aces, where you know that if someone's hitting an ace, they did it perfectly. And in the case of our relegation match, they are very close in their aces, 14 versus 12, Seppo's slight advantage. In the promotion match, it's 37 versus 22. And I do know like Ordboka has a lot of quality. I don't know the quality of Dem Freckles as much, but it's evident there. 37 aces is a ton, and that's the sort of player that can compete and will have success if they reach Division 2. Not that Division 2 in any sense is ever going to be easy. I'm incredibly excited for Division 2 next season because I think it's somehow going to be even closer in skill, no matter who comes out of this promotion match.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning that Freckles also has 3 perfect games out of the season, so that's where a lot of his aces did come from. But they're still very close on points, which means that Ordboka has definitely been able to make the most of his unperfect games and low aces, while Freckles has needed every single one of them just to be able to survive up there in that playoff hunt. So it could be really interesting indeed. So we wish the players the best of luck for that. Well, to wrap up, we had our finals in Division 4 and 5 in their promotion and relegation playoff battles. We'll start with Division 4's promotion, and it is Steal This Nick. Yeah, so definitely a Division 4B playoff match for that one. And Steal This Nick takes it. I'm not too happy about that because I beat him in the last 2 seasons. So I would like him to stick around. So for my chances of promotion, Diesel is probably the tougher opponent for me. But a very nice win there for Steal This Nick, Calamity.
Yeah, and it was a bit of an annoying seed because it was one of those that essentially round 1 was in Norway. And if you know, the coastline of Norway is very annoying to check, because essentially half the country is a coastline that sometimes even goes like 100 kilometers inland, essentially, where you don't really know if the map maker considers that coast or not, because technically it is, but it also could just be a river. And so you've got hundreds of kilometers to check, and the round itself basically had no information other than the town name. So also you still have the problems with movement in Geoguessr currently, so you couldn't really travel that far either. Not that I think it would have helped, because there was really nothing anywhere else here either that you could have got to within even 4.5 minutes, I don't think. So essentially, Steal the Snake just got luckier in that round. He dropped only 400 points and Diesel dropped about 1,500. Not even 1,500, almost 1,900 points. Diesel came back a bit in the end there. They both of them pretty much 5K'd the 3 preceding rounds, and then it was one round in Portugal that Steal the Snake messed up on in the end and dropped about 630 points there. But it wasn't enough, of course, to overturn it for Diesel, who just was too far away in Norway in round 1 and got a bit unlucky there. I'm very interested to see how Steal the Snake will do in Division 3 next season, because I've said it once before, I think, but Steal the Snake is someone who's pretty much always uses all of his time. So he's going to have a lot less time to work with in Division 3 next season. So I'm interested in if he can adjust to that or if he'll really struggle with it.
Definitely. And Pwndnoob, a fellow Division 4B player, promoted here, winning out against his compatriot there. Very nice for him. Any thoughts about how he might do in Division 3 as well?
Congratulations to Stealth as Nick, and it was very close. To note, there was a lot of diversity in the scores. That was the 8th and 10th best score currently, so they're right next to each other on the leaderboard for this week's results. I think Stealth as Nick is kind of surprised based on the conversations I've had with them or seen in, say, like the Discord with the amount of success that they've had, but they deserve the victory. They deserve to go through. They've been really good this season, just consistently and throughout the season too. And I am also happy to keep Diesel down here in Division 4. I think Diesel is definitely the quality of Division 3, but ever since I got into Reddit League at all, I always considered Diesel. He was like during the preseason, the person I was looking at as a comparable, and I'm happy to have him. He did actually get promoted last season. This is the first season he won't be promoted with this loss, but it's really could have gone either way. I think both these players are pretty equivalent, and it shows in the score.
Very nice. Well, at the other end, Pwndnoob, we finally see your name here, and you survived your relegation final playoff against Theos by a score of about 900 points to the better in that one. So yeah, congrats to you on surviving. And for Theos, on the other hand, it's a second straight relegation. It's a bit rough for him there.
Yeah, as I said at the beginning of the show, I did this less than an hour ago, and it was very stressful. Up until I completely banked Norway, so I spent 3.5 minutes trying to get through this coastline, getting completely nowhere because there was nowhere to go. Zoomed in on Norway, and within 5 seconds, just found this incredibly small town, and that is a lot of luck that I haven't had the rest of this season. So it's nice to finally be paid off for what has been a really rough season for me. And then there were 3 locations where you could quickly identify the country with the Portugal, Spain, and the like French Canadian round. The one round that almost lost it for me, and this score ended up being a lot closer than I wish it was an Indonesia round, where Indonesia is just not something I'm very familiar with. I found the island or state that it was in, but simply just didn't locate the island. It was just not on my radar at all. And thankfully, I was close enough to barely squeak it out against the Oza, who I believe beat me the first time that we matched up.
Very nice. Yeah, Calamity.
Yeah, so essentially both of the deciding games in Division 4 came down to Norway. Though in this case, with Pwndnoob actually finding it, it's a bit less of a luck-based round and more so just that Theos didn't find it. Although I guess you could still say might have been slight luck that Pwndnoob managed to spot it, whereas Theos, might have just looked in the wrong places. You never know. But yeah, if you just think back to the total scores in Division 4, I think Pwndnoob definitely deserved to stay up here. Not saying that Theos wouldn't have. Theos also did have a higher score than some of the people above him. But yeah, it was even between them, it was still 13,000 points of difference. So yeah, Pwndnoob maybe next season, a bit more luck would be nice. You maybe wouldn't have to
Yeah.
go through the relegation game.
I lost a lot of rounds by just a few hundred points, including one where I got 24,898 points, and
Oh, yeah, I
my
remember.
opponent 25K. So I missed the tiebreaker by 2 points, and I'm just like, yep, that adds up. I'm looking at the results on Norway. It looks like I was the only person who found it. There were some people who guessed within 50 kilometers, but I got incredibly fortunate. And I mean, it was the first place I zoomed, so it would have been where I placed anyways. But yeah, it's a crazy round. The Oscar will still do fine in Division 5. I know a lot of players who've been relegated before continue to struggle. We see that with Redox, where he just continues to be in relegation no matter which division we put him in. But I don't think that Oscar's too much trouble in Division 5, assuming that Division 5 doesn't get loaded with new players who are incredibly skilled, which is actually probably going to happen now that I think about it.
Yeah, so definitely the competition is ever increasing season on season. So best of luck to Theos in Division 5 next time. Let's move over to that Division 5 then and their promotion battle to see who might be joining Pwndnoob and myself in Division 4. And it is Yemeni, which at the cost of Xander, who is also a very good player, both scores pretty decent Calamity. But yeah, Yemeni just edging out Xander there.
Yeah, it's just a matter of about 400 points there. The Division 5 seed actually wasn't too difficult either. And this round in particular, if I can find it, yeah, it came down to rounds 3 and 4. That coincidentally were also the 2 rounds I personally struggled with when I played the seed, which was one round in Denmark on the coast, and sort of on the main island in the northeast, where there wasn't a lot of information other than just a couple of town names. And yeah, Yemeni managed to find it and managed to find it surprisingly quickly, even in a minute and 16 seconds. So again, similar to Pwndnoob, must have been just the place he started to look. And Xander struggled and in all of the 5 minutes couldn't find the right location. And in the end was about 350 points away. And then we got around on the coast in Senegal, where neither of them managed to find it, but Yemeni was a bit closer. Yeah, as the coast in Senegal isn't too long. Surprisingly here for Xander, he actually went for a part of the coastline that was sort of in the wrong, like had the coast to the, or the ocean to the wrong cardinal direction. He went in a place where the coastline went northwest, southeast, whereas the actual location was northeast, southwest. But that round cost him just barely a few, well, not even 100 points there, 95. So those two were the rounds that were the deciders, 5Ks, essentially in all of the other rounds. So Yemeni dropped 1 point in round 5, but that's not too big of a deal. And yeah, I would have said before this, like, no matter who would have won, they would have definitely deserved to go through and go into Division 4 next season. And I think that Yemeni is going to do just fine in there as well. Although it probably depends a lot on how Division 4 will be composed, or who it will be composed of next season. Like how, like who will be in which side of the division, essentially.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think he's definitely someone who can also fight for a good result in Division 4 next season.
Yeah, Pwndnoob.
I just want to talk about the seed. This is one of my favorite seeds I've ever seen in Geoguessr. It just felt like maximum Geoguessr because there was a incredibly far north in Alaska, which just was very unique. We had one in Chile, which is just a town I'd happened to been to, in Valparaiso, which is lovely. And then also Wales, which Wales isn't hard to identify. There was Welsh and English, and the town name was pretty findable, so it wasn't an issue for our players. But I don't think I've seen Wales show up in Reddit League, at least in the 2 seasons I've been in. With the Denmark and the Senegal, both countries I love seeing, just because I think they're fun to play in Geoguessr. Really, just a really fun seed all around. It'll be fun to potentially play against Hergemine. They might end up in the other division with Division 4, assuming that the format is the same in the future. But congratulations to them. It is unfortunate, by the way, that I think Americans have just really had a bad role all throughout this broadcast. We saw a couple Americans get relegated, and Xander here, again, not able to carry the flag. Not that 24,000 was necessarily a terrible score in this seed. It's just Hergermain played better, found locations, and I think it really did come down to that Senegal. With especially on being on the wrong coast entirely is enough to lose. It's unforgivable. So
Yeah, very nice. And finally, Division 5 in their relegation match, it is Kiribati who survives against Clemens. Unfortunately for you, Calamity, your countryman, not up to the task and will have to re-qualify if he'd like to join us back again in Reddit League next season. But Kiribati definitely having a good game, almost a perfect score, just a couple 100 points off of that.
Yeah, it was kind of what you could have expected an outcome of this game to look like. As I pretty much predicted last week, Kiribati, if he has a good game, he probably would be winning. But it essentially came down to one round for Clemens, because you've actually 5K'd all of the other 4 rounds, so he had a pretty good game for his standards, actually. But then he guessed Belgium in the Denmark round, which, to use Pwndnoobs from about 1 minute ago, unforgivable. Execute him. No, yeah. That was just, I don't know what he saw. Actually, he didn't go Belgium. He went Netherlands, just like on the border between Belgium and the Netherlands. I don't know what he saw. Probably, I say it might just have come down to experience or the lack thereof, and just not being able to differentiate between like Dutch and Danish, which are not that similar in terms of languages and have quite a bit of differences in the alphabet. But yeah, probably just he needs a bit more time, a bit more practice. And I think it'll depend on how many people want to continue Reddit League going forward, how many people sign up for it again. But if it is like every season where we see like maybe 15 to 20 people drop out, then he should have a pretty decent chance of qualifying again next season.
Nice. Well, we look forward to seeing how they all perform in their new divisions next season, and I can't wait to get into the championship playoffs for Division 1 to decide the title for all of Reddit League, and it will be played on this map, AI Generated Worlds. We have 2 world maps back to back. But yeah, this one, no theme, pretty much just as random as it can get, except a little bit of adjustments to get rid of some of the kind of weird or bad coverage that you can get in the official world map for this one. But yeah, 85,000 locations, average score of 15,000 points. It has been played almost 80,000 times. Yeah, this is pretty much as random and as crazy as it can get, Calamity.
Yeah, people who've watched the show for multiple seasons know at this point that I'm not the biggest fan of the AI-generated worlds. Well, basically, I'm not the biggest fan of playing it. I'm not saying it's a bad map by any means. It does tend to put you in odd places that you may not usually get placed in, so it is definitely on the more difficult side. And I just hope it's going to produce some fair seeds so that everyone, especially in Division 1, but also in all of the other relegation and promotion playoff games that are still to play, gets a good chance at putting in their best work and getting a good finish to the season.
Yeah, Pwndnoob.
Yeah, when I think of AI generated world, I think of an example of northern Canada. Like we just saw a round in northern Alaska, and that was unique in itself. But I don't know how precisely it's made, but I just feel like it puts you in more rural locations without it being actively like a rural world, which we've played before in Reddit League.
Mm.
And that can result in really hard pinpoints. This isn't like a diverse world where everything is meant to be potentially pinpointable or like on an intersection. There's a bit of love put into that. AI generated world has no love. It does not care about you or what you want. It will put you wherever it feels like, and I think that's a really good place to be in a playoff situation. I think that's healthy, but it does not mean that the players are going to necessarily come out happy, or they could just get 5 locations put in 5 cities that they can pinpoint, especially with the quality that we're seeing in the higher divisions. They don't drop world locations very often. So
Yeah, so definitely maybe a map you do want. Then you don't. If everybody's getting a perfect score, it's going to be pretty ugly when somebody loses on a couple of meters, like Singapore. But if if it's a matter of a few points, maybe a little bit easier to take a loss in your playoff run. If it's kind of just a slightly rough location, unable to pinpoint it given the nature of the location and whatnot. So definitely looking forward to seeing how this one plays out. And yeah, we're hoping to bring you as many of these matches as we possibly can. So definitely hit that subscribe button if you haven't already to make sure you don't miss any of them. And yeah, we'll see you in the playoffs. Take care.
Bye.
bye bye.